amazing panel members that have traveled all the way from Auckland. And I know one of them, the esteemed Welby Inc. had to change his flights to be here today. So I'm really grateful. And I'd like to invite Mr. Welby Inc., the director of Punch. Sir, if you'll kindly come forward. We have got Lisa Prestt, who is a first AD and has worked across numerous film productions from international film productions in New Zealand. Lisa Prestt, first AD. Alix, Whittaker, the wonderful producer who's ever so forthcoming in supporting filmmakers, and she's done a lot of work in feature film and also short films. And of course, Bala, Murali, Shingade, who's a director who's won awards with his short film that's still traveling around the world. So just briefly again now, this is the first time I've met Bala, but I'm very well aware of Bala's work as a director. His film, Teriyaki, won the award at NZIFF and also got selected at MIF, and it's traveled throughout other festivals in the country. Huge congrats on that, bro, and it was a great short film. I'll allow him to speak about it a little bit later. Again, here, Welby Inc.'s acclaimed director, and also is a professor at AUT with the Department of Film. Design, yeah. Now, I had the privilege to actually watch Punch at NZIFF last year. I recall going up to him at the end and said this was absolutely beautiful. And also just the way he spoke about his vision. And as a filmmaker myself, I resonated and I would like to aspire to be a director just like Welby Inc., who's got so much love and passion for the story he's trying to say. Alix, Whittaker, and another producer who've come through the ranks. I mean, both of you have come through the ranks with Film Commission, with talent development and all of that, and today she's producing a handful of stuff. She is, correct me if I'm wrong here, Alix, you work alongside Thunderlips?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thunderlips.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you recently produced a film called I'm Alien Pregnant.
Yeah.
Yes. I saw that little short film and it is amazing. So I haven't seen the latest, obviously, but Alix is also a feature film producer, and again, she'll talk a little bit more about her experience. And finally, the wonderful Lisa Prestt. Her CV is, taller than me, and has done a lot as a first lady. And this is why I wanted to run this session, because I was privileged enough last year to be in a similar panel that spoke about the dynamics of these three key roles on a film set and the importance of having a really good first AD. However, I'm going to take the opportunity to also further down the conversation to ask Welby, and Welby, when we had this conversation about the panel, he said something really interesting about more so of just the first AD, the director and the producer, it's how to create a harmonious set. And I'd really love for you to talk further about that. Now, I really want this conversation to be quite free flow. I will be having a few questions which I'll direct at the panel members, and please feel free to raise your hands and ask questions. So actually I want to get started with a very simple question, and this is to Lisa. Lisa, you've done a lot of first AD. Actually, Lisa, could you actually speak about you yourself as a first AD and perhaps go into what a first AD is actually?
I've never used one of these before. Oh, the pressure. I've worked my way up from kind of smaller things where I was firsting. I did a lot of music videos and short films first up, which I actually ended up producing so I could first AD them. It took me a while to do that, and then finally I got the opportunity to third on a bigger job, and from there I just kind of worked my way up through the roles, and the last couple of years I've been firsting jobs for a company called Kevin & Co. So we've done jobs such as Creamery, Double Parked, Homebound, Raised by Refugees, and so on. And I don't know how to kind of put the first AD role into like an easy little package, but we start by breaking down all the scripts and seeing what we need, and then we put that into a program called Movie Magic, where we break it all down and we create a schedule depending on the cast availabilities, the location availabilities, and all our other requirements. And from the pre-production area, you kind of see it all the way through the shoot, and then you kind of finish as soon as we call wrap, which is great. I don't know what else you want to hear.
So Lisa, now, who does the first AD represent on a film set?
I've been thinking about this question. Because really, we represent the producers and the production. We're there to make sure the job gets done, and we shoot it on schedule, and we achieve everything we want to every day. But I also feel like once you jump on set, you start representing the crew. You know how they feel, you know what they're capable of. So you speak for them as well. You want to kind of bridge all the gaps, because sometimes it becomes a crew versus production, and you really don't want that, because that's not good for anyone. So I try and, you want to make sure you're getting your day and getting everything to schedule, and the director's getting what they want. But you also need to make sure the crew are happy and feel like they're heard, and you're looking after them, because they're there to do the work as well. They're there with all the team. It's not one person or the other that's more important. We have to do it all together.
Now, this question is actually for all here. From whether it's a short film, a music video, to a feature space. And I would really love for all of y'all to share your avocado on this. How can a successful dynamic be nurtured between the three professions, the three key roles here? Yes, how can it be nurtured? Where does it start from?
Why don't you start?
Oh shit, sorry. Sorry. Just before I start, I just acknowledge I don't know what's in your backpack, but something's important that's driven you here, and I think this is a very good thing that you've done. The more our communities talk with each other, our future lies with you, and some of us had to stumble into where we are. So the more we can make a help with roads, knowing that there are stories behind all of you that will come into the world that will make this a better country. So, so to the question. Sorry, can you ask that again?
No. It's what creates a successful or how can a successful dynamic be nurtured between the first AD, the director and producer?
I loved your answer because it was truthful. So my background is I write and direct, but I also often work in the art departments of my films because I see the world of the film as a character, we'll say. So I have found that it's really important to have a very good relationship with the first AD, because so I don't treat them as an adjunct to the producer, because I've seen that go bad. Because you can end up with somebody tapping the watch and going, you've got 10 minutes to get this scene, and you actually, so you only, every minute's costing a huge amount of money, you can't afford to waste money, but you also have to get the film. And the film has to touch the very heart of what it is that made that a purposeful thing to make. So I do things a little differently. I will spend quite a bit of time with the first AD talking about the vision. So to give a concrete example, my work is quite poetic. It's got strong stories, but visually it's poetic. So what often happens is if you have a producer who's used to producing strong or normal narrative, they will prioritize all the narrative scenes and treat the poetics as frou-frou that gets stuck on at the end of the day. But in fact, when the poetics is part of the voice of the work that will wrench the heart out of your audience, it's really, really important. So I've found that by being able to talk with and have a very good relationship with the first AD means that you have an advocate when push comes to shove in the scheduling, so you are not And I think it's also fairer for the first AD because it is a very difficult space to be in when things go bad on a set. So the first thing is I try and make a strong relationship about the vision of the film. I understand that we are a team of people and we're working to get the best film, not the best generic film, the film that was supposed to be there. And then I also know that I have to learn stuff. Every film I've made, I never go in thinking I'm Cecil B. DeMille. I don't. It's such a dangerous thing. And so I know that I can learn stuff from the first AD, but I also know that it's my job as the director to protect the vision of that film. And so and I don't want to leave this person in a difficult position where they're being pulled three ways. So in answer, I spend time beforehand talking about the vision, talking about the film, and talking about how I make film. And then I find the strengths in that person that I value, and I tend to play to those strengths. So I will ask advice from those strengths because there might be strengths that I don't have. And I've worked on one film where there was not a good relationship with the first AD, and it was Purgatory. And I've worked on 4 that had great relationships. They're a godsend.
To extend on that, Welby, now, do you seek out your first AD? And same thing for you, Bala, if I could just move on to that same question to you after that.
I recommend now. So this is a wee country and it leaks like a sieve. And so if somebody is good out there, people know. So I will ask people like my DOP, the camera person. I always listen a lot to sound because I'm quite deaf. So I rely very heavily on a good relationship with my sound people. And so I will ask who's a good, either if there's someone who I've worked with who's a good AD, I will recommend them. And if not, I will ask key people who I respect who's a good first AD. Or who's coming up who would be good in that role, who's got ability to, because it's not diplomacy, it's like I loved this when I first heard it. This description of film is a cross between the army and a 3-ring circus. And that's actually what it is. On one level, you have to, it's got to run like clockwork because every down minute is losing money and losing opportunity or losing light or losing availability. But at the same time, the environment also has to be the best to get the best creative work out there. It has, if it does not become fertile for creative decision making, you get mediocrity. Just another, we could put in your own expletive there, film that fell short of where it should have been. So, yeah.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Bala, would you mind expanding on that? About your relationship with first ADs and when do you start that process?
Yeah. I've had a few really good experiences with first ADs, and I think I had them like accidentally choosing really great first ADs, which is awesome. But then I've had 1 or 2 experiences where it was not good. And since then I've kind of learned that actually I almost want to treat choosing your first AD like casting actors. Like you put so much effort into casting your actor to make sure they're the right person for that role, that you kind of want to do that with first ADs as well. And you kind of do it already with your camera people, your DOP or your lighting people, because it's a vision thing, right? But I think we should treat first ADs like that as well, because it's such an important role. And there are not many like really great first ADs working at kind of our level in this kind of short film run, because they've either just stepped up into first ADing or they're like fully booked out for the year, like Lisa, right? Or they're working way above our level, like Lisa. So yeah, I think also what makes to just pass on my 2 cents for your first question, what makes a harmonious relationship, it's about finding the balance as well of personalities. I've found, like when you have on set, a lot of people talk about the director, the first AD, and the DOP as kind of like the tripod, the 3 people that kind of like run the set. And I think if you've got 3 people that have really similar energies, you can sometimes end up with a bit of conflict. But if you've got 3 that really balance each other out and like supplement each other's personalities and each other's energies, that can work really well. Like for example, on set, I'm quite excitable because I get quite into everything. And if you've got a first AD that's like really intense and quite energetic and kind of yelling at everyone, that's not suitable, in my opinion, to my personality. And so I prefer to work with people who are much more like chill and calm and like Lisa. And but then you've got other directors who are like super chill and super calm and like quiet and directing kind of like through whispers or whatever. In which case a really loud, energetic first AD could actually work really well with that. So it's about picking your first AD as though you're casting an actor. It's just as important. And then it's about finding that balance of personalities and skill sets as well. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Alix, where you've produced a lot. Where do you fit in this dynamic of relationships when getting the first AD with the director?
Yeah, I loved your answer there that finding the first AD is like casting, because that really resonates with me. I think when I'm looking for a first AD, I always think about who the director is and I've never thought of it in terms of that wording, but it's perfect. Finding the right energetic balance is really important, and also finding, there are some finding first ADs who naturally prioritize the things that are important to that director too, I think that's quite important. And I also really advocate for a lot of discussion up front. Like Welby, I love to spend a lot of time together. I like to do a lot of that work over food, over meals, having lunches and breakfasts and dinners together, the director, first AD and myself, and talking about the work and talking about what is most important in the work. And I think, for some directors it might be the visual poetry, and for others it might be the performance, and especially if you're working with a child actor, for example, then you might be prioritizing a lot of time for those scenes with the child actor, or non-actor, somebody who's first time acting, or it really depends on what's in the text, what's in the script, and what's important to the director's vision. And I think having a mutual understanding between your producer, your director, and your first AD, that these are the things that are most important to the creative integrity of the project, and therefore these are the things that we will make the hard decisions on set for, like we'll push scenes to the next day, or we might choose to go overtime. These are the things that we would make those decisions for, and if it's not one of these things that we've all decided are like the most important thing that we will make difficult calls for, if it's not one of those things, we've all agreed already we're not going to do it. So when you get to those hard moments on set, instead of it being like you've got 10 minutes, it's like, hey, we talked about this, like how important is another take here, or how important is that fifth shot, like how much coverage do you really need on this thing, because we talked about it, and the thing we're doing next is the most important, and I think when you have that understanding before you go in across all three, you can navigate those sticky moments with more being more on the same page from the beginning, which is really useful. So I think having lots of conversation up front about what's important to who, and having a mutual understanding and being heard, and I think that actually goes both ways. It's not just the director's vision. I think it's also important for the first AD and the director to hear what's important to the producer too. Like you might be in a situation where the producer's going, we've got a tight budget on this and we can't afford any overtime, and I've contracted all of the crew to understand that we can't pay them overtime, and so it's really important to me that we don't do overtime, because I don't want crew working overtime for free. And I think, with the director and the first AD hear that and respect that, they will work hard. Directors will make the tough calls, because they will be like, yeah, I get it, I don't want the crew working overtime for free either. So I think just having that, complete transparency and mutual understanding about what we're prioritizing helps to make those tough calls.
Cool. Now, when does that conversation start?
The minute you start working together.
So when is that? So for example, let's say we're in November right now, and we know that in February we're going to production for John Doe, right? The film called John Doe. When does that relationship start?
I guess it depends on the project. So for a short film, you probably wouldn't bring your first AD on board until you've got the finance. And once you're financed, you try and get someone on board. But also it's kind of hard with short films because experienced ADs don't know if they'll be available or not, so you can't book them very far in advance. Sometimes you have to wait until you're 6 weeks out to start calling them, or even 4 weeks out. So you have less of a lead time there. But I think, for feature films it's slightly different, although it can change. I have a feature film I've just gone in for production finance for, and as a part of the production finance application we needed a schedule, so we worked with a first AD on that, and started having those conversations so that that first kind of blueprint schedule would be in the right space as a first draft. And we hope to be able to work with that first AD when we are financed, but you never know, they might end up being busy on something else and then we'd have to bring somebody else in. So if we do work with them, we've already started those conversations, and that first draft schedule is based loosely on mine and the director's values going into that project. But yeah, I think the minute you start working with them, you start having those conversations up front. I think before you even start doing the work, the first conversations are like, let's hang out. For me, let's eat some food. Let's talk about how you like to work. Let's talk about how I like to work. The director talks about how they like to work. Let's all talk about what kind of set, what kind of vibe we want. I think you talk about the tripod of the DOP, the director, and the first AD, and I also think the producer, because they're in that position of leadership. These four roles really set the energetic vibe of the set, and I think if you're all striving for the same energy, you'll get there. And sometimes it is like upbeat, high energy, or sometimes it's like quite chill and mellow, and but yeah, I think those conversations as early as possible.
Thank you. I really appreciate what you just said. I think I still remember you giving us advice in a particular workshop recently. And at the end of the day, we are all human beings, and I think connecting human being to human being first is the first step before thinking of them as director, producer, first AD, or whatever. So I really appreciate you bringing that up again. Now, Lisa, how does a first AD balance? You've spoken a bit about this, but if you don't mind going further into this, for example, starting with the scheduling and into tapping into the creative needs of the director. So finding the balance between the creative needs of the director and the logistical needs of the shoot. So that's what Alix was just talking about. Now, from the first AD's perspective.
Generally, since I've been first ADing, I've been working on smaller shows that are, as usual, really ambitious. So time is always, squeezed. We're trying to achieve a lot in very little time. So I love what Alix says about starting those conversations early, but you don't actually always have time to do that. And I start shooting on my next show tomorrow, and I've basically had basically 2 weeks prep. So everybody's in the same boat. We all have to get all our prep done in those 2 weeks, as well as having these conversations and trying to get to know. For me, it's all about trying to get to know the vibe and the people you're working with. Because if you don't have time to go for lunch and do these things, it's getting the feel of how they operate. Because then you can, for me, it's about balancing that. And you have conversation as you go through, as I program the scripts into the schedule, about, I know I've done it enough to know kind of how I envision it to be shot, but there's some things that you need to go to the director and be like, look, is there anything specific you're thinking for any of these scenes? What's important to you? Do you need extra time for this scene or that scene? And that sort of stuff. And really, with these shows, you get to know them, you kind of build up a bit of a rapport in pre-production. And then once you start shooting, because you have to shoot really quickly, you have to hit the ground running. And the first week is generally a bit of a roller coaster, because the crew are all finding their feet, all learning these new people that you're working with. And you find your balance, and then you learn what people need. And I feel I'm lucky enough to know when I look at a director whether they need another one. And we develop kind of this unspoken rapport where you kind of communicate via looks. I can tell if they really want another one for the sake of the story, and I understand that if we don't have it, we need to go again, even if that means cutting time down for something else a bit later. And it's the same with the DP. Sometimes they're really striving to get something amazing that will really push it forward, but it takes a bit longer. So it's kind of a give and take. And yeah, we kind of feel that out on set because we don't have the time in pre-production to do it. And it's really like once you get to know someone, you understand what they need and what they want. And it's just being open, all round, being open and saying, look, we are running out of time. In my head, for example, this scene at the later the day is really a crux scene. It's really important. So do you want to go again here at a scene that's kind of a filler, should I say, in jeopardy, put the other one to jeopardy. You know, you don't want to jeopardize getting that in all you want to get another little take for this one. But it's kind of just a give and take on set, really. You kind of get to know people and you talk through what's important to them.
Now, just a quick question. Have you all worked with each other by any chance? No one here?
I worked with Alix
Music videos.
videos at the
right.
very start.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Bala and I worked recently on Homebound.
Oh,
as
right.
But we
an
haven't worked
actor.
together yet.
Oh, so that's okay. Okay.
Bala and I have sort of,
Oh,
we've worked together, yeah.
Alex was our one of our mentors for Petty and Ike.
Ah, right. Yes,
Yeah.
of course, yes.
Yeah.
Now,
And the series producer for your
And the
recent
series
Sunday
producer.
stories.
oh, right. There you go. Okay, so there is a working relationship here. So that's really cool. Now, Lisa, this is directed to both Lisa and Welby here. How much, so when you draft or say create your first schedule, how much influence, if you were to take it to Welby, let's just use both of you for example, how much influence are you expecting from Welby, and how much influence, Welby, would you be providing towards that schedule?
Do you want to start? No.
Will we divorce after this?
I'm going to go sit on that side.
So, what I was saying before about, I always understand the first AD has known and thought about some logistical things that I may not have. So, for instance, shooting from a car or in a car chews up time. Tidal shots where you've got to come along a beach and be off the beach before the tide comes in. There is no negotiation with that. You have to do it. You know, the night shoots at 2 in the morning and everyone's slumped. You know, these are things that your first AD knows deeply. And so I think the point that's come up here, which is really true, is if you can't develop good relationships with people and maintain them, this is one of the worst jobs to be in, you know. But if you can, so I'd have to be really clear. I don't see a triangle at the centre. I'm not a hierarchical guy. I believe that respect means the person who makes the coffee has the same value as the gaffer and the DOP and me. And everybody's treated with respect. And I don't cast or employ prima donnas because they suck oxygen out of everybody else. So I'm really adamant. So I don't care how talented they are. And because it was just demonstrated here, we all have stories about ourselves that float around this country, so you know who to stay away from and you know who to listen to for their advice. Because we're an incestuous wee country in terms of by necessity. So I expect, so I'm always clear with what my expectations are and I listen very carefully to the first AD's expectations. I expect them, if I have made it clear that something is important, so for instance, a common thing that often happens at the end of a scene is people treat film as a visual medium, and so if there's things in the camera, it's okay. But if you're wanting to build up really astounding soundscape with that, there's not that, you know, I'll go. To me, sound is really important at the end. Before we wrap any scene, I need to check with the sound people to make sure that we have got this, and I want to be able to liaise. I want to be able, because I want that relationship to be co-creative. So by having those discussions first, then I expect that that person will go into bat for me if I'm consumed somewhere else, because I'm having to work with an actor or talk to hair and makeup or check something else in the art department. Similarly, they have to be able to trust me when they say, because I will always say, how long do we have for this? I will always ask that. Yeah, and I want a person who'll tell me the truth. So I go, okay, we're recording the first shot, sometimes that's valuable, sometimes it's not. So that having somebody, and normally you can hear it in a first AD, they speak quite plainly if they're quite honest, and you go, if this person has got the ability to protect the vulnerability of somebody, but to get the best out of them by that, but also when necessary, to tell the truth, and go, no on something. And if our relationship is good enough, we don't hear that on set. That doesn't happen. I think it happens when things have gone wrong. So high trust, high honesty relationship. I expect that person, as a director, to be able to go into bat when I'm because you're at 300% on set. You are beholden to everybody on there to be able to answer questions that they've got. So I expect that person, not the producer. So I expect this person to be the in-between person. That would be my answer.
What was the question again?
Effectively, when it comes to scheduling, what is your expectation as the first AD from the director, like the director's influence into the schedule?
I'll have to be honest, most of the time they haven't given me very much. Because generally we're at a fast pace to get it all ready to go really quickly. I generally schedule everything, because the shows I've been working on, the producers work ahead. They work on it a lot earlier than everyone else. So once I come on board and the director and DP, we all come on quite late. So at that point, everybody's full go in their own regards. So I am pressured to put everything into a schedule so hopefully we know where we can start and people can start prepping for that. I'm talking 2-3 weeks out of shooting a 6-week shoot.
Is it a series or a film?
It's a series.
Series.
Yeah, so generally a 6 to 8 episode series.
Yep.
Which I do, like Alix did recently on a feature, I did do a prelim schedule. But sometimes that's on scripts that haven't been approved yet, they haven't been locked. So you basically, most of the time I have to start again. So you have to rework the scripts, put the new scripts back in, and break them all down. So that's a lot of work, and then you have to actually schedule them with all the cast and availability issues, the location availability issues. And it's just a moving jigsaw all the time. So generally I haven't had a lot of directors' input, I have more producers' input in regards to what we can achieve, what we can't achieve. We talk very closely in regards to casting, because they often want to cast some actors that will be really great for the role, but they have other projects on the go and they can't always work with our schedule. And I do my best to see if I can make the schedule work for these key people. And sometimes it's a no, but you have to really try and get the best people on the job. So working the schedule and moving things around to try and get that, I think is important. But at some point, at one point you kind of go, this is not achievable. We need to either look for someone new or look for a new location. Just need to make it more of a realistic shooting schedule, because sometimes people come in with great ambition, which I love, but you do have to be a bit realistic when it comes to shooting, because you can have all the ideas in the world, and trust me, I want to be able to do that, but we just don't have the time or the money to do it. So someone, you know, and generally the producers I've worked with all understand that, and we're all pushing to get the best we can. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. You kind of have to be the voice of reason sometimes.
Now, before I break to the audience questions, do you, Lisa, bring on your team of 80s?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm still working. I'm getting used to it. I'm getting better at doing this. But generally, I picked my third AD. The job I'm doing at the moment doesn't have a second AD, so the production are doing the call sheets, which is an interesting way of working it. It can be quite tough as a first AD, because then you have to pick up a lot of the slack. The second AD is really important to a first, because they go through all of your schedules, all of your notes, make sure you haven't missed a character. You know, you're putting eight scripts into a schedule, and no, they're usually there to review your work, basically, and to question it. And sometimes productions are very good at doing that, but sometimes it feels quite scary, not feeling like anyone else has got your back. So if I happen to miss, if the character's not scripted or is just in the background and it doesn't get pulled from one scene to another, I might miss it. And that's quite worrying, because obviously they might not be there that day. But yes, I tend to bring on my own team of ADs. You need people to support you, like in any role. You need to be able to turn around and trust them. You need to know they've got your back when things go wrong. And I had a great second AD on Creamery, and we had a lot of challenges on that shoot. It was very ambitious. It was a big shoot. And, you know, every time something went wrong, you know, I'm still new in this role. I'm getting better. You know, you learn on every job you do. But having a really strong second to come to set any time there's something wrong, or any time you don't know something, is really important, because then you feel like you've got the on-set backup. Like, don't get me wrong, the director and the DP in that job were amazing. But it's someone that understands your role, like, to a T.
Roseanne directed that.
Yeah, Roseanne.
Roseanne, yeah.
Yeah, she's amazing.
My friends, any questions from you all at this point of time? Please do ask.
May I ask two questions? One's very quick. Just out of interest, who calls action?
Just depends on the job.
Nice.
Generally, yeah, I've worked with directors that like to call action and some don't. If it gets to be, if it's a complicated shot where you have cameras, camera cues, specific moments, and you have to, if it gets complicated with camera moves or stunts or anything like that, I generally ask to take over, just because it's easier. I'll know when everybody is ready. When the director's sometimes just focused on one bit, I can see what's going on around, and I can see if people aren't ready. So I generally ask if I can take over then, if it's someone that likes to call action. Most of the time recently, I've called action, but I always leave it to directors to call cut unless they've given me the authority. They said, I'll just keep going until you say it.
Interesting.
But when it comes to stunts and bigger things, I'm a firm believer that if anyone's unhappy or if something's going wrong and we can't see it, anyone can call cut and we'll stop and assess, because safety is the most important thing.
Nice. May I please ask another one? Directors, what's your path to eliciting a great performance?
So it's going to sound weird, but it's not trying to be glib. It's vision. It's having a really clear vision and making sure that everybody doesn't just hear, they feel what that vision is. And the other part is that you are trusted. So they know that you know your film really, really well, inside out. And that, so I spend a lot of time, if I'm eating lunch, I never eat it with the same people. I don't go off into a little huddle with the first AD and the producers unless there's something really, really important. So I distribute myself across the production, but I've worked on stuff like, I started off making TVCs, appalling TVCs, television commercials, and then into children's television, which was equally appalling, which is why I finally moved to writing and directing my own stuff, because I wanted to leave something of value in the world. And but I found that I worked on sets where the director didn't have a clear vision or was not communicating it, and it ended up being the producer's work. And that's the worst thing. I think that's the worst thing you can have. It can, a film, if you, especially if you've written and you're directing, and also you are personally responsible to people whose lives, if people are donating time and goodwill, you're responsible to that relationship that endures longer than the film. So I see it as like, we have this long history of going into places, everybody being all kind and lovely to everybody, then exiting in a pile of diesel fumes, and everyone goes, fuck off, you're finished now. But actually we don't. We actually have a relationship with those. You know, there are some locations that just will not allow film on anymore because it was such a toxic experience the last time they came. So my view is that we always have to, the director, it's part of our unwritten part, is that we have to make sure that people are better off than we left. Even if we had no money, we had a bunch of flowers to take a week later, or we made certain that someone was acknowledged, or we made certain that someone was thanked. So that would be my answer.
Thank you.
Bala, would you like expand on that from your experience?
About eliciting performance?
Yeah.
Yeah. So many things go into that. I would 100% agree with what Welby said about vision and communication. Casting, obviously, like on a tangible level, is probably the most important thing when it comes to a performance. If you cast the right actor, you will have such a head start in terms of getting that performance. More important than casting good actors, I think, is casting good people. Like, if you can, on fast turnaround TV, it's often not possible, but if you can, like Alix was saying with meeting the crew and stuff, get to know your cast before you like 100% lock them in, if time allows. And then just collaboration, I think, as well. It's like actors are good at acting, right? Like they do their job and they know what they're doing. But if you, as a director, are able to like not only communicate your vision, but hear what they have to say and hear their questions, hear their suggestions. Oftentimes I'll find that like that was a way better idea than what I had. You do that bit, and then they'll do it, and it's great. I think it helps as well as a director to try and do some acting. You don't have to put it out or anything, but take an acting class. Like I found that because I act as well, and they kind of help each other out. Like when you're acting, you learn what you like from a director, and when you're directing, you kind of get to know your different actors and direct them in slightly different ways, because each actor is different as well. And trust, I think Welby touched on this, but in a short film that I shot recently, it was a pretty big cast of like six, seven core actors, and I like had a conversation on day 3 of the shoot or something, like with one of the actors. I was like, this is going to be a weird question, but like, do you trust me? And then we had like a 45-minute conversation. The schedule fell apart, but it was worth it. It was worth it because I found that, yeah. I found that after that particular actor and I were just so much more open with each other, and then the performance just changed suddenly. So even like, there's unsaid trust, and then sometimes there's said trust. You can talk about trust and be like, I feel like you don't trust me, and then they can be like, no, I do trust you. Or they can be like, yeah, I don't trust you. I've never had that happen, thankfully, and I don't really know what I would do if they said that. I try and convince them to trust me, I guess, or whatever. But yeah, so many things. You can talk for days about performance. It's like, yeah. But those are just some of the things, I think.
Thank you. Nathan, you had a question?
Yeah, firstly guys, thanks for showing your co-papa around all this stuff. My part is kind of specific, I guess, to each project, whether it be music video, feature or short. But I guess down here, without as much industry experience. I was just wondering, have you guys ever found like a sweet spot in terms of filming times, or just kind of observing how crew are doing? Do you have any skills you could share on how you can kind of assess your crew and understand, am I working them too hard, am I working them not enough?
I'd probably say just talk about it. Like be real open about that kind of stuff. Like check in with people. Like how are you guys doing? We do it with cast a lot. Like if it's a particularly tough scene because it's emotionally demanding or physically demanding, we'll check in with them after every take. I think do that with crew as well. Like if it's a particularly intense lighting setup and your lighting department have been running around carrying things for like 2 hours non-stop, like check in and be like, it feels like you guys need a break. Should we take a break? And let them actually like, say that they need a break, rather than just like gauging it from afar. I think be really open and talk about it would be what I suggest and what I do, I think, in my project.
Thank you, Sam.
Agree. Always good to talk about it.
Do not talk about it.
Do what you talk.
You can usually tell if people if it's pretty obvious if people aren't working hard. You see people slacking off. You see them at the unit table and so on. But generally, most people that work in this industry are passionate and they want to be here. So most people give it their all. And there's a few that kind of aren't motivated to do that, and I find that they get phased out pretty quick. Because it's a hard industry, and you have to want to be here to do it. But yeah, generally, if you're on a tough shoot and things aren't quite going to plan, I talk to all the departments and I say, look, we are moving a bit slower than I'd expected. I can't really tell what it is at the moment. There are all these kind of, you just have to figure out, you talk to them and you say, look, is there anything we can do to make your job better, make it run smoother? And you talk to all the departments, and generally people are just finding their feet, and once they get their stride, you'll be up and running real quick. And you see this going through, the longer shoots, so it's a bit different on short films because you don't quite get there. You notice it on the start, the first week is generally a bit of a roller coaster, and then you all kind of merge and you all know what everybody else needs and you learn how people work. So you all kind of mesh together, and then the rest, you're a team and you're together, and you can do this if everybody's on board. But once you get to know your crew, you can see the stress signs, and at that point you can either back away or you can say, look, can I help, or what can we do to help you? And that's what I tend to do.
It's a good question. So I think beyond talking is also watching. So I'm quite a quiet person on set. And I know when you're directing, you do have to be 300% with the film which is about to come into being. So you're 300% in anticipation of what is about to happen, and then you're trying to communicate that to people and work with that synergy. But I found that talking on its own, sometimes you can have people, some sets are they carry power dynamics where some people don't have the strength to speak. And they can come with injuries that you can't see, old bruises. So I've found that it's really important because you can't always watch as the director because you're trying to watch your film, to have those people who you trust, who see things, So I also put store in that. The other one is that you are being watched all the time. People are reading you to go, who the fuck is this, And the film, if it's going well, if the culture of the film's good, it gathers higher levels of trust. So we shot Punch in the middle of COVID. At any minute we couldn't even afford the full insurance. So we were going to be in the kaka if things went wrong. So we had people shut in cars doing their work through sealed windows in the cars. We were in a very stressful time. Having people on your team who didn't just rely on what is said, but could watch and go, I think they're okay, or might worth help to make sure that those people are not always empowered, were also blossoming and bringing their best to that environment. That would be my answer.
Any more questions before I go back?
Can I add one more thing?
No,
on
of
that?
course, Alex, please do.
I also think actually doing work in advance of being on set to make sure that there are good communication systems there. So making sure that everyone in the cast and crew knows who they can talk to, or a few different people rather than just one person, because the one person you've offered they might not feel comfortable talking to. And doing that work in advance to communicate that, if you ever need to talk to anyone, here are the options, talk to any of these people, they're always going to be happy to hear your thoughts or concerns. That's really important too. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm a bit confused with like scheduling. Is it more of like a producer thing, like going through with like the first AD and then the director just sort of like accepts what the schedule is?
It's a little bit of, it's everyone in some ways. I mean, the producers make calls along the way that affect the schedule. They might make a decision along with the director usually for a specific location or cast member, or sometimes it could even be a particular lens that you might need for one scene, but it's on a really big job, so it's only available on the Thursday of your second week. Those decisions affect the schedule, and those decisions as they're made are then communicated to the first AD, who now has to try and re-wrangle the schedule to make that work so that we can shoot that particular scene on Thursday, because that's the only day the special lens is available to us, or whatever it is, the decision that you've made as producer and director. So the first AD is coming into it with those constraints, and those are the logistical constraints, and then there are the creative constraints of wanting to prioritize the child performance and give more time to this scene instead of that scene, or so it's really all three, I think, are working on the schedule all the time, and the kind of primary person holding that responsibility is the first AD. It's their job to figure out how to make it work, or to communicate, okay, well, we're going to have to make a choice here because we can't do that scene on Thursday and have the pool or whatever it is. There'll be things like that, and then decisions need to be made, and the first AD holds that responsibility to name that, and they're like, make the decision, but the producer and the director have to be involved in those decisions too, and they do affect both the budget and also the creative, and impact the crew too, ultimately, and the cast. Sometimes you might want to shoot some scenes before or after others because of the emotional journey the cast member needs to go on, and maybe that's more important than the lens, or that it's all three. Yeah.
I don't really have any more to add. She said it everything. She said everything.
Any more questions before I carry on? You've got another 15 minutes or so to just finish off, and I'm just going to finish up a couple more questions. I think for me this is one of my favorite questions, because having started as a first and venturing into direction, I've experienced the ups and downs. What is the best way to deal with the director and first AD difference, given that all that prep is done and we're now right smack in production, and all of a sudden fire is being lit here and there, and there's a bit of disharmony, if I may use that word. Yes, I actually wanted Alex to actually deal with this from a producer point of view, and then move on to Lisa and the directors actually.
It's the same answer I would give for any two people on the cast or crew who are having a difference of opinion or difference in approach, and I think my first go-to is empathetic listening, like really trying to give both people individually, usually separate of each other, a really empathetic ear, because often I find if somebody feels like they've been heard, that in their concern, and that the producer is like genuinely listening and trying to problem solve that can change everything immediately. Just that feeling of, okay, you're trying to hear me, you're trying to understand me, you're trying to work with me. I feel like I'm not alone in this problem anymore because you're helping me with it, producer. That can make a big difference on just that on its own. And then I think it's helping the two people who are having the disagreement to see and hear each other and to empathize with each other. Oftentimes when these disagreements are happening, there's not like any maliciousness. Nobody's actually trying to be difficult. You know, they're usually both coming at it from a place of wanting to make the best work and wanting to support the vision, and they're just like missing each other in that somewhere. And so if you can figure out where they're missing each other and help them understand, hear and see each other, that usually clears things up. And if it doesn't clear things up, probably someone needs to be fired.
Harsh truth.
And that person would be me. I was just trying to think. I've very rarely had any issues with the directors I've worked with. If it is if we do have strife, it's obvious. It's usually because either communication has broken down and we're not talking openly to each other, or the respect has been respect is gone, because we both need to have mutual respect, because we're both in leading roles. You know, we're trying to lead the crew, and if you're not banded together, things start to fall apart. So it's, for me, whenever something like that happens, I try to like bridge the gap, see what's happening, try and still be open, and be there to try and fix it together and continue with this project to make it a better environment to work with and get what we all need, basically.
On my last project, which was a feature, it wasn't my idea, it was actually the DOP, but I learned a really helpful thing. Because it's very public when you're working, so if anything falls out, it can fall out in public and then do a lot of damage. Because we were both very strong, we had very strong vision, and even though we'd been in the room sitting, we even shared an office during pre-production. The walls were covered with drawings, we talked about everything, we got out on set, and the visions were slightly different. We actually had a key word that we'd drop and go, this is fucking serious, we need to, sorry. No, it was actually, that was important. That we had agreed to, that if it was not negotiable and we really had to be listened, we would not be heard, but be listened to, either of us would just drop that. And then when you put the brakes on, have a quick confer. It didn't have to look like, the fall of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon to everybody, and then back into it again. That became really helpful, and I had I had a really good first AD, and so we also had that there. We never had to use it with first AD, but we did have to use it with the DOP, and that was so I found that a really helpful thing, because one of the things is, because it is so public, when things and people are tired and people are watching, you have to protect the mana of people. And the other reason why it was important was that Punch was a film about gay men in rural areas. So I'm a gay man, and I've found that a lot of people made assumptions that they knew about that world and were giving advice where they were not qualified to give advice. So I remember a little scene, we had a small town thing, and the guy went in to buy something in the shop. So the first AD stepped in and said, no, he'd be using a credit card. And they go, he makes money in the bogs, it's a cash society, he's not going to have that. But I had to make that clear in front of everybody, which shouldn't have had to. So one of the other things I've found really helpful is, once people know you and trust you, territory has to be quite carefully respected. Just like you don't go and pick up someone's gear and pack up and help it, that's their stuff, they do that. That there are, if you've been the writer, there are certain, and you're writing from some kind of cultural or specialist position, you have to make sure that people understand that there are some things that are not negotiable, and if you're going to talk about them, they're not done out in the public. We have some device for a quick conference, quick talk, And then, because we don't have time to sit down over a coffee for 20 minutes, we've got to get this in 3 minutes. So, emergency word for a discreet way of protecting people's mana, and also where you come from a specific cultural or insightful perspective, that's understood that if you've written about that and you come from that world, you're probably the person that should be listened to, and don't get into the situation where people are making cultural decisions based on things they don't know.
That's a great tool. Thanks, Welby. What was the word?
What was
the word?
Well, this has gotten really strange. We opened the set, we were shooting, Tim Roth had just come over, and we were shooting, and I thought, oh God, are we going to have an oxygen sucker here? He wasn't actually. But we were shooting on a day on black sand. It ground out a lens on the camera. Oh, fuck! That's a big one. But there was no avoiding it. It was. Well, no, there was avoiding it. But so it was a very high pressure day, and so we just used the word grit. And grit went all the way through the film. It didn't matter whether you were in a classroom in Te Atatu or whether you were in, wherever. Just grit, and it was just. And you just go. I'm gritting my teeth here, and it all looks smiley, but it actually goes, nah, that's something. And we both had to use it with each other. It wasn't just because that relationship is so important, So because I always think that mana is important on a dignity, holding dignity, and looking after people's dignity, but also because you have to get to the truth. You don't have time to waffle around for over 20 minutes. So if you hear me say grit, you go, I'll change it next time.
Bala, do you have any thoughts on that in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's already been said. I had a similar experience to Welby's, where I had a first AD suggest a lot of ideas and had a lot of feedback on what we were shooting. And I think part of it came down to and I'm still quite young and emerging in this field, the industry's favourite word, emerging. But the first AD I had directed things as well, and so that was really tricky. Where they thought, from their perspective, they were actually being really helpful and
He's talking about something really true.
kind of coaching me a little bit. And I was like, I get that I'm young, but this story is is from me, and I get it, and I've got a real clear vision. And if the vision is bad, let me do the bad thing. I'll just make a shit film, but at least I'll have made my film, Because I don't think it really matters how objectively amazing the film is, as long as it's true to that team and that vision and that director or producer or writer, whoever's there in the team. Not that the first AD doesn't have any creative input or anything like that, but in this particular project, it was every single thought I had was, oh, but what about this? Are you sure you don't want to do this? And I was like, I'm pretty sure, bro. Anyway. And I think for that it came down to, and Welby mentioned this as well, trust. I eventually pulled this person aside and I was like, I feel like you don't trust me, this is a big thing. But that they were like, oh no, I'm just trying to be helpful. And I was like, I get it, and I really appreciate it, but I think what would be the most helpful is if we had a couple of lines drawn in terms of boundaries where I'm in charge of these 3 things and you're in charge of those 3 things, and I trust you to do your job. You're the person with the schedule and the time, and that if you tell me we got time for this, then I'm going to do it. If you tell me we don't got time, I trust you. You know what you're doing. I trust you. And then after that, it kind of got better. But I've also had an experience, and Lisa touched on this. If people are not hardworking is one thing, but if people are also not good people, they'll also kind of get phased out. And you clock it halfway through a project, or at one point you're just okay, we've tried to fix this, and it doesn't feel like it's going to be fixed, and we're just not suited to working with each other. That's cool. I can still respect you and work with you for the rest of the shoot, but I know this isn't going to change, right? And that's happened as well before. And in those situations, I've just gritted my teeth and I've gone, cool. This is the way you work. This is the way I work. Let's just survive this, and then we'll respectfully and kindly part ways. And that's happened before as well, and I think that always is going to keep happening.
I really like that because I recently was on a shoot. We were shooting in Cook Islands, and I've never met the first AD, and it was the most horrendous experience to be stuck in an island with the first AD that you cannot jam with. And as a co-director, I had to go and step into production, start doing scheduling, call sheets. You don't do that, But just like you, Bala, I had to just accept it, respect that indifference, and you're stuck. You can't do anything, right? And you just got to, just do it, do the best you can, and then of course at the end of the day, respectfully go separately.
Yeah.
So.
I think also, I don't know how to tie this in, but it's just a thought that came to my mind, so I'll just say I don't know how it's relevant. But there's so many different ways of running a set and of thinking about a set, and you've already heard like 4 different ways. Like we've kind of talked about different ways that we think of sets even. And our industry is amazing and we love it, but a lot of the time people think of the idea of a hierarchy automatically meaning that respect is given more to certain people than others. And I think Welby touched on this before, but I think it all kind of comes down to respect. And I think, and I work in this way, that you can have a hierarchy and have equal respect to everyone, because hierarchy is just about leadership. And at the end of the day, someone has to make decisions about certain things. If the DOP asks the first AC to do something, that's part of the job. That is hierarchy, right? And that is leadership. But if they don't respect that person, then that's a completely different thing. And you got to call out when they two kind of get mixed up, if that makes sense. I think in order to run a smooth set, hierarchy is necessary, but hierarchy does not entail disrespect, if that makes sense. And often where the disharmony comes from between not just directors and first ADs, but any two people, is when people have different understandings of what hierarchy means. Hierarchy just means leadership, and just means that someone can ask you to do something, and that is part of your job. Like when you're third AD, you're working for the first AD. I don't think a third AD is going to get upset that the first AD is asking them to do something, right? But if there's disrespect there, that's a different thing. And for finding that fine line and like pointing it out when it happens is I think really important.
Okay. Awesome. Now, Lisa, just one question for you here. Can you give an example of suggestions that you have provided to a director as a first AD? Now, whether it's creative or non-creative, or from your experience, what are suggestions that a first AD can give to a director?
I mean, it just depends on what you're shooting. I try not to give too many suggestions. I feel like the director knows what they want and the DP knows what they want. But if something isn't working, I give suggestions as to how, in my head, it could work, or we could make it work better, usually in order to cut down shots. Yeah. But also, I just think back recently, I was on a tech recce for the show, and we've got basically 2 days filming on balconies, like adjacent balconies. And the location that they provided us with was essentially two separate buildings and 2 separate balconies. And these scenes are, we've got 2 days of them. You've got, 8 to 9 pages a day, which is a lot. And when I first read the script, I was like, okay, well, obviously this will be played mostly from his side because it's his point of view. But when I saw what they wanted to achieve, it would mean logistically it's really difficult because you'd have to go downstairs, across the road, upstairs, next one, to do all the cross-shooting. So first we proposed a double camera day, second camera day, so you could shoot over shoulder, you could get it all, you could shoot out the scenes instead of block shooting, which was also not an option for us. But then the other issue was that we had a lot of night scenes. So trying to light 2 balconies, they're actually balconies, they're 2 stories high, became a real issue for us on our budget, and also limited the shots that we'd be able to get for each scene. So when I saw this location, I happened to peer down the other side of the one balcony, and it was a long, long balcony, and I suggested putting a partition in there and basically cheating that the two balconies, still side by side, got a partition, and that the back doors for the one balcony became this other person's house. So it's suggestions like that which they ended up going for, and will make the shooting, the shooting day a lot easier. It didn't compromise too much of what they wanted, but it made it a whole lot easier for the whole crew, for the actors, and just more achievable, because if not, those other days would have been just too big to achieve.
Can I add something? How many of you writing? Do you know something that I've got a couple of good mates now who are first ADs. When I'm writing a screenplay, I sit down and talk with them.
Nice.
To go, so I want something that can be realised inside a budget in its finest form. So when I started off, I didn't even know what a bloody first AD was, and then I learned that they were the enemy of the film, and then I learned that they were the ally of the film, and then I realised that actually in shaping this story, if they have more experience, and I'm talking about an experienced first AD, they're hugely helpful in shaping the story, so you actually can lower the amount of demands that story is putting on the environment of the film, because someone is talking through the logistics of that decision. So I don't write a lot of night scenes in a film now, because they are so demanding night after night after night. They're really, really demanding. They rip it out of people. So if there's a night scene, there's an absolute reason there, and even when I'm writing, I think that and that and that could be shot together. So I've found that relationship doesn't just occur in production, it can actually permeate right back. And actually, a guy, fairly optimistic guy, fairly good terms with life, and so great relationships you build up with people can really be formative in something more than just the place where you think that they operate professionally.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think that's a great call there. I don't have a lot to do with the writers, because often they're done by the time I come on board, but as you said, having those conversations really helps, because it's good for both parties. One party knows all the logistics that are required to shoot these scenes, and can tell them and say, this is how long it's gonna take, and exactly, night shoots are very taxing on the crew and very difficult, and I try and avoid them as much as possible. I'm like, this will be day for night. Find somewhere we can black out and pretend it's night. But yeah, those conversations are really important and can save you a lot of time and hassle down the line. So if you do have someone that knows all the logistics of what this will take, yeah, definitely reach out and talk to them.
Would that be a line producer as well?
Yeah, most line producers and producers know, if they're experienced, they know what's required on set and what will make an easy shoot. And yeah.
Alix and Lisa, now, just giving very perspective to our industry, short films and feature films, say more short films. And because this is a question that I know a lot of directors do ask first ADs. How many pages do you schedule for a day, given the constraints that we have in our screen sector, minimal budget and all of that? How have you all?
How long is a piece of string?
Such a hard question, so specific to the script. Also different between short films and feature films. Like, ironically, you'll often be shooting less pages per day on a short film than you will be on a feature film. Often you'll get a lot more time. I'm thinking about that a lot at the moment, because the feature film that we're on the precipice of making, we shot a proof of concept for, and we're using pretty much the same crew, cast, directors, for the feature. And I'm thinking, oh no, they've been set up to expect to have all of this time that we had on the short film, and we're not going to have that on the feature film. So yeah, it really depends on the script. It depends on the project, whether it's a short or a feature, and what's happening. You know, on that feature film we have prosthetics and puppets, and so on the days that we also have a lot of bodily fluids. And on the days that we're working with those, we're shooting very little page count wise, and other days we're having to smash through the pages, so it moves around a lot too.
Yeah, it does depend on the script, as you said. Some scripts are fairly easy to shoot, but you have other scripts that are really challenging. For example, in Creamery we had stunts practically every day, and they weren't easy stunts. So those kind of things take a long time, and you don't want to rush them, you know. So you prep for that. You say, yes, this day is just a talking head day, which is, you know, you smash through the pages that day, but on the stunt days or anything with tricky moving pieces, they take longer. So you schedule around that, but yeah, it just depends on the scripts and what you're shooting, and also the emotional scenes take a long time, and you have to have everything in place then, because obviously cast members are putting themselves out there for these big emotional scenes, and they do need to be brought back to a spot at the end of the show or the end of the day to make sure everyone's okay. You know, a scene comes to mind when we were in, it's real high stress, we were in Eden Park shooting one of the big climax scenes on Double Parked, where the two casts basically break up, and it just ended up, we had to shoot at a perfect spot of light when it was just coming down, and it was a big emotional scene, and like finally the sun had set and we called cut, and everyone's like, oh, and the entire crew just felt, you know, exhausted, and everybody kind of went away going, oh, I actually feel okay. So at that point, I think you look back on these moments and you're like, actually, we should have all come together and just had a moment together to be like, okay, that scene is over. It was a scene. We're all okay. Like, we're here for each other if you want to reach out. Because you get, you know, when people perform such emotional scenes, you all get drawn in. And I know we all came back the next day going, I didn't feel good last night. Did not feel happy. But it's things like that you remember, and you go, oh, well, next time I'll do it differently, I'll do it better.
Can I add 2 cents to that? We had a similar experience on a project that I was working on as an actor, and it was early this year during the floods, and so we were shooting out on location and outdoors, and it started raining in the morning, and we were like, well, we should go inside and shoot something else. So then we quickly pivoted, prepped to shoot something else, which was quite a heavy scene. And so the other actors and I, you know, did our prep and got into the zone, and it was pretty emotionally heavy. It was like super quiet on set and very intense. And the rain just kept going and got heavier and heavier and heavier. And rightfully so, the producers eventually came through and were like, look, we've got flood warnings, like, stuff's happening, everyone needs to go home because safety, right? Yeah. And we were like, yeah, fair enough. But we were so, like, we were holding all this energy, and we were so tense as the cast, and the crew as well, because the crew were like, this is a heavy scene we're about to shoot. And a similar thing where, like, it was suddenly like, well, we were up here with our energy, and then it was like, now go home. And we were like, what the fuck? What do I do with all of this, like, all of these feelings and emotions, and like, people crying over there, and someone else is like, driving through rain, and it was intense. And I tautoko what Lisa's saying about some like ceremonial moment to just come together and give closure to that, to just be like, release that shit, like don't go home taking that, because we all went home. And actually what happened was, like, later that night at midnight we kind of jumped on a phone call, on like a video call, and we was like, how you guys doing? And no one was really doing okay, but that's okay. And I think that's where certain practices that particularly the first AD and director can talk about beforehand, like karakia, can be really helpful to like open and close the day in terms of bringing everyone together and then closing it up and then releasing the energy to then like go about your day, because that was particularly intense. On top of all the emotional stuff we were doing, the city was flooding and people were checking in on their loved ones. It was like pretty intense, but that's when, you know, having certain things prepared that you've talked about in your prep meetings can be really helpful, and I think that's up to the leaders. Again, that hierarchy versus leadership thing, the leaders on set in terms of like producers, directors, first ADs, to make sure that stuff happens when it needs to happen.
Can I just say something else? So in Punch was the first time we'd worked with an intimacy coach, and I was a bit suspicious to start off with, but actually it was good, it was worth it. I am ambivalent about genericized rituals, because they don't work for everybody, and I think it's better to work with a duty of care, a perceptive duty of care. So I remember a genericized ritual that happened at the end of the film when a lot of people just wanted to go home. And somebody thought that a particular genericized ritual where we all held hands in the water and breathed in and told each other what we could smell. Well, the crew were going, I can smell you. You know, it was being undermined hugely because it seemed right on paper, but actually it wasn't. It wasn't respectful of the diversity of people who were there. And some were detoxing, and some were fucking exhausted and just want to go home. And so I think that I believe that debriefing is important, but I think the front end stuff is really important too. So things like closed sets, and that's agreed and we understand when that happened. I now would say if you have a good intimacy coach, they're a hugely helpful thing. And the other one that I found was alluded to before is like actors are all different, right? They're not a generic beast. And so some people, I always say with an actor, it's my job to work out, to understand how you get the best out of this, knowing that you're going to be different to someone else. So before a difficult scene, I will always go, what do you need after this? And invariably it's different. It's not a genericized ritual. It's different. And sometimes people need the respect of space or silence. Other people need to talk. So I think I'm cautious about rituals. I don't think it is a ritual then to respect land and mana whenua, to respect sensitivities around stuff. I think those are important. But debriefing rituals, I have a little more caution around.
I'll just add that I've worked with some very good intimacy coordinators, and as a first AD, that you have to run the set when these things happen. You do feel like you're unequipped because you haven't really been told how to manage it, and obviously you're dealing with a lot of vulnerable people. So an IC, an intimacy coordinator I think is invaluable on set from my perspective, and also for like this scene in double part. I don't think we weren't aware how big it would get. Basically, we didn't know it was going to get to this extent emotionally. But on days like that, the IC coach would come in, take cast away, make sure they're all okay. But they're also there a lot for the crew. The people I've worked with say, look, if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're having any emotions, please talk to me. And they're very open, and I just think it's one of the best things that's come out of this industry recently, and I think they're just invaluable.
I'm going to channel my first AD and say we've got to wrap this up.
Sorry, all right.
My dear friends, thank you so much. Thank you to the panel members for being here today and answering questions. We can have a workshop on this, and I'm sure in due course we'll be running more sessions like this. And I just want to say heartfelt gratitude to all of you all for being here and sharing and empowering our filmmakers here. And hopefully we get a chance to work with you all in the future. Thank you so much.